Dr. Frederick Schwartz of Lansing, Michigan, is actively engaged there in the practice of internal medicine. He has been in practice since 1940, with the exception of 4 years during World War II when he was in the Medical Corps of the United States Army. He graduated from the Medical College of the University of Cincinnati in 1931, took his internship at Cincinnati General Hospital 1931 to 1932. He completed a general residency at the Fort Hamilton Hospital in Hamilton, Ohio, 1932 to 1933. Held a fellowship at the Mayo Clinic in Internal Medicine from 1936 to 1939. He was first assistant in medicine at the Mayo Clinic 1939 to 1940, and he's a diplomat of the American Board of Internal Medicine. At present, he is president of his County Medical Society in Michigan. He belongs to the Michigan State Medical Association, the American Medical Association, the American College of Physicians, the International and the American Gerontological Societies, the Michigan Heart Association, the American Geriatric Society, and the American Diabetes Association. My, you belong to... Do you attend all these meetings? Oh, she complains too. He has written a number of papers, and I think without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Frederick Schwartz. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Burkhardt. Ladies and gentlemen of the Kirkpatrick Memorial Workshop on Aging, can you hear? Is this? Can everybody hear? I am supposed to talk to you tonight on the health of the aged. And Dr. Burkhardt just told me that the character of the audience was not quite what he estimated in his letter to me of a month or so back. And so, since the number of physicians in the crowd is not quite as high as he thought it was going to be, I'm going to have to jack my speech up a little bit to the level of the audience. This is going to necessitate a shifting of some of these leaves of paper that I brought with me to the stand, which reminds me of the story of the Baptist minister who had the habit of fixing up his sermon during the week on a number of sheets of paper like this, leaves of paper, and on Sunday morning he would stand up in front of the audience and leaf through them, and somehow or other a sermon would come out. And this particular morning he was talking about Adam in the Garden of Eden, and he was shifting through his leaves, and he said, and Adam said, there must be a leaf missing somewhere. I had the privilege of looking through the programs of the previous meetings of this group, and I see the names of all my friends. Wilma Donahue, our own George Davis, who we have been on the same speaking circuit for a number of years, and I hold him very high in high estimation. Dr. Stiglitz, Dr. Ed Bortz, Dr. Murray Fertiber, Dr. Warren Andrew, Dr. Topper of the University of Michigan, and Monsignor Wilbur Camp of Detroit. And when I see this great list of illustrious people who have been here ahead of me, you can blame it on the weather if you want, but what could anybody say? I mean, following this group. It reminds me of another story that I'm sure George Davis didn't tell me, so I think I can tell it. It happened, this was many centuries ago, when
the method of travel in the countries that existed in those days was largely by shanked mares or on foot. And this small kingdom was visited one day by a group of nuns who requested of the king permission to visit his kingdom and wanted someone to show them around. The king was very happy to have these ladies come and visit his country and see how the people lived, how the schools ran, and so forth. But he says, I'm very sorry, but he says, all the knights who would ordinarily be available for this service are out on other duties. And the only person who happens to be available at the present time is the court jester. Now, I assure you, he knows the terrain very well and will be able to show you around the country, but of course he's not a knight, he's just a court jester. So they talked among themselves for a while, finally agreed that this would be satisfactory, so they started off to visit the kingdom. And everything went well for several days, and finally they came to a stream. The night before we had a rain like we had a short time ago, and the bridges washed out. And the sisters were quite concerned how they're going to get across this stream, because to wade this stream as deep as it was meant that their habits would get wet, and then they would drag in the dirt on the other side, and they'd certainly be a spectacle when they got to the next town. And so the jester finally took a hint, and he says, well, I'll be very happy to carry you each across, he said, if you'd like, and this way your habits won't get wet. So after another consultation, they agreed. So he gathered up the first sister, she sat on his shoulder this way, and he held her ankles this way, and they started across the stream, and he got in the middle of the stream, and he started to chuckle. And then he laughed, and then he just shook, and he almost shook the sister off in the water. Finally he quieted down as they approached the other bank, and she says, my good man, why all the merriment? And he says, I was just thinking this was Virgin on the Ridiculous. I think as I start this little talk, I would like to change the subject, the topic rather, not the subject particularly. But let's call this the health of the aging. Because in my 6, 7, 8 years of being connected with this problem, or this, it's not a problem to me, with this aging challenge, one thing we have done is to change the vocabulary somewhat. And the word aged, we have marked off the book. We can't conceive of a senior citizen who's aged, who's through, like the whiskey after they finished the 4 or 8 years in the charcoal barrel is now bottled off. This is aged. This is done. But the living individual continues to age. So aging is a living, growing, functioning process with emphasis on the growing. And so we would change the topic and the health of the aging. This may be a very long time yet for many of you who are in the audience. So it's an important change. Now I'd like to discuss for a moment some of the things that we have come to believe. Maybe we can't prove all these things, but things we have come to believe in our study of the aging. I first became acquainted with this subject matter when the chief of the VNA in our hometown asked me shortly after the war to come and give a talk to the visiting nurses on their graduation night or yearly night, I've forgotten which. And I said, what do we talk about? She's geriatrics. Well, I had heard the word. And so I looked up in the literature. I think probably all the literature in those days could have been piled on one of these tables. Now you couldn't get it in this building, I'm sure. But I gave my first talk on geriatrics to this group. And Dr. Snell was in the crowd, who has since gone to his heavenly reward. And he didn't sleep that night at the table. He says, I always come to these doggone things, always go to sleep, but he says, you talked about something that interested me tonight, and he said, I paid you the compliment of not going to sleep. And so this got me interested. And from then on, I have taken this as a part of my practice, a part of my vocation and avocation. And subsequently attended the International Congress in London and got interested and got to know this list of names that we just mentioned. And then came my work, which still continues at the AMA, with a group of individuals who I consider probably the most sophisticated thinkers on aging in this world. They start talking about aging where most people leave off. And our first meeting in 1954, when this group got together, we were called the Geriatric Committee. Now, geriatric means the science of the diseases of the aging. And when we studied this proposition, we couldn't find any diseases of the aging. There were no diseases that were age-specific or connected with age. In 1954, the year that we first met, there were 98 children in the United States below the age of 5 years who died of arteriosclerotic heart disease, including coronary disease. And this diagnosis appeared in every 5-year segment from then on. Last year in this country, there are 8 people past 65 who died of infantile poliomyelitis, and 14 more died of measles. Now, you just can't mix them up any more thoroughly. And so, at the end of this session, we said, what are we doing? A geriatric committee? A committee without a cause? Was there an interest here? And we finally decided that there was an interest here because everybody was paying attention to this segment of our population for various reasons. But our reason as physicians were that in this group there were some people who were sick, and they were a legitimate cause for our interest. There were some people who were frail and feeble who might become sick, and they too became a subject of our interest. But there was a great group of well individuals whose living could be improved, whose depth of living could be improved by attention from those people who knew something about the health needs of an older people. And for this reason, we went back to the House of Delegates and asked them to rename us the Committee on Aging. And so we have existed ever since. Our first object was to educate ourselves. This is a new field. We had contact with every major organization in the country that had an interest in aging. We have gone around the United States federal government offices on 2 different occasions. We've met in New York and in Baltimore and in Cleveland and in Salt Lake City and Seattle and Dallas and Birmingham and Miami Beach in the wintertime. And we have talked with people who had ideas. We've talked with labor, with management, with law, with everybody. And as a result of this, we have formulated a few ideas for the interest of the patients we think. With this type of approach, or with this knowledge, we approach the problem as a family physician approaches the problem, realizing that a medical problem that is before you in your office must be handled in the light of his own family, his own environment, his employment, his finances, his religion, his community, and 1,000 other things that you as a physician must know about your patient if you're going to give him the full type of medical treatment that he deserves. And so we, as the Committee on Aging, decided that it was necessary for us to know about the finances of the ulster, to know about housing, to know about everything else. So we have become jacks of all trades, and I hope we're masters of a few of them. Well, this started us on this long road of learning about the older senior citizens of the United States. And we come up with some conclusions after these studies. I don't have to go, I think, through all the details. To most of you who, if you are interested, you know most of this material. But our conclusions were something like this: that by and large, and this was testimony that we offered before the Ways and Means Committee and twice before the McNamara Committee, by and large, about 90% of the people past 65 are in good health. By and large, as a result of our studies and as indicated by the Federal Reserve Bank's statistics, by and large, this group is financially better off than any other age group in the nation. And the final thing, there are no problems of the aging, except those imposed by retirement, that are not also the problems of every other age group. Now be sure, if you're going to quote that, you quote it right. Don't say there are no problems. There are no problems except those imposed by retirement that are not also the problems of every other age group. Now this is our philosophy. These are the things we believe. These are the things we found substantiated by our first regional conference in Salt Lake City. We picked this area primarily because the Mormon Church has this philosophy that the sick and the well will individually take care of themselves as long as they can, and when they can't do it, the family will do it. When they can't do it, the church will do it, and when they can't do it, somebody in the local situation will do it. And we received very good support from the Catholic Church at the same meeting. It was from this meeting that we went forth to 9 regional conference over the nation with the same theme in mind. And we believe in it. We think it is the solution of not the problems of aging. There are no problems of aging, as I've already said there. We think of nothing but the opportunities and challenges of aging. This is a growing process. This is not a deterioration. We don't like the use of the word even. Now, in the course of this work, we thought that the older people needed some medical attention. How can we do this? So the committee came up with a periodic health appraisal. This is not new. The AMA has seconded this idea since 1922, but no one has done anything about it. And so we came up with a health appraisal, periodic health appraisal for older people first. We apply this to everybody, however, now. But the philosophy behind this periodic appraisal was something like this. We outlined a form that the doctor could follow. We don't care what he used, a blank page or what, just so he looks at this to see that he includes everything, so that a physical examination in New York will be the same as we get in Muncie and the same in Iowa City. Because in our studies we found that a lot of people were complaining. They would go to one doctor one time and another doctor another time or another city and want a health checkup and, you're all right, you don't have any bother you, take your blood pressure on your way. Or somebody goes to the gynecologist and gets a vaginal examination, a red count, and they don't know. They think they've had the worst, you see. And so we are trying to form a concrete product that can be delivered to people with some expectation of similarity over the country. Object number one, after you do this isn't going to be a specialist examination. I am an internist, but before that I was a general practitioner a few miles across the Indiana border in St. Henry, Ohio. And I stayed there in a town of 571 people for 3 years before I specialized or took up internal medicine. But I still am a family physician. And so this health appraisal idea is to use the 5 senses, the blood pressure machine, the flashlight, and the percussion hammer. Now, if the doctor wants to throw in an ophthalmoscope and a proctoscope and a few other things in this examination, it's his business. but the basic concept is here. With this basic concept, we're able to tell at the end of the laboratory work in this examination, you do or do not have any organic disease. That's point number one. We go into point number two. You do or do not have any potential organic disease. I mean, if you've seen this patient over several periods of a year, say, and the diastolic blood pressure, or the lower blood pressure is going from 90, 95, 100, you can sort of suspect, especially if in the past history the grandfather's had a stroke, that this fellow is heading for some high blood pressure. And so you discuss his situation now on the basis of his potential disease and try to guide him to lessen the effects of this tendency if possible. We also go into, number three, the environmental status of the patient. How does he get along with the boss? How does he get along with the wife? What about the neighbors next door? What kind of fellow is he? What happens to him when he takes a drink? All of these things, sort of a philosophical, psychological appraisal. Because in a good many people, sometimes up to 70% of the people that we see in the general office, their symptoms arise primarily from a trigger mechanism that has to do with not being able to adjust to their environment. Every time they go in the office, the boss balls them out or looks at them sharply, and there's no rapport, and it's a tense 8 hours. And he feels better when he goes home. This needs help, and you can sometimes do it. These are the three major first things that you do. The next thing has to do with what we call anticipatory medicine. This is a phrase that we stole from Dr. Stiglitz. Of course, he can't defend himself at the moment, but it's a concern that we've had for some time, which arose from Dr. Koval's specialty, rehabilitation, because one of our biggest problems in rehabilitation is motivation. Here's the chap I have in mind who had a stroke. And he was dragged into the hospital, and here he stayed. And he was quite content to stay here, and he was quite content not to do anything about it. Now, it so happened that when you got into his history, his wife was a nagger from nowhere, and his kids had all left home. He had really nothing to live for. He'd get up in the morning and rush over the Oldsmobile. I have to get that plugged in because that's made in my town. He rushed over the Oldsmobile and worked 8 hours or 10 hours and come home to get nagged again till the next morning and then off to work again. Well, after he had the stroke, his wife became very attentive. She brought him in the little tidbits that he liked so well. His kids took turns coming home on the weekends, and this is another thing he wanted. And these are the things he wanted in the first place. So why should he get well? This was the means to the end. And you can't motivate a fellow very much with this idea in mind. So we thought of the idea of pre-motivating people. So after we get this far along the physical appraisal, we suggest to the patient, well now, what happened, or what would happen to you if you went to your neighbor's a swimming pool, for instance, and dove off the board and there was no water in the pool, and you got a broken back and paralyzed from the waist down? Would you be a millstone around your family's neck, or have you got the guts to take a rehabilitation course and get back on your feet again and take care of yourself? Well, this poses quite a problem. And of course, right away he wants to know, what are you talking about, all these morbid things for, this is hard on my ego, my personality. But we do this in civil defense every day. One community gets together and they say, well now, if a bomb's going to fall in Muncie right here in the center of the town, what's your job going to be? You go to the hospital, you go to that corner, you go to triage, and everybody's got a job to do. And under these circumstances, if it's practiced, when something does happen, the town ought to get by with less damage and less mortality than if they had no plan at all. And if this is true of civil defense, then why isn't it true of the individual? So we pose it to the individual. Now, I don't have to tell the doctors, because the doctors know from their experience, when they started in the hospital as a young man and then later worked in the hospital till they got their internship over, that every time that mutilated tray went by with somebody who just came from an automobile accident, there, but with the grace of God, goes me. He's preparing himself, he's motivating himself. This is what we're trying to do with patients. Now, if you don't believe this pays off, Dr. Bussey told me a couple of years ago that at Duke University they started their new health accident income protection policies for the university. Everybody, a whole new plan. You can buy what your income dictated you should have. But each group had a different rate. And who was the cheapest one on the campus? The doctor. Because he was the last fellow in the hospital and the first fellow out. Whether he was seat first or not, didn't make any difference. He was the first one out. So this pays off, this motivation business. Now the next thing that we do with this physical appraisal is to observe and to evaluate the patient's nutrition and advise them accordingly. This is a big problem because 28 million people in the United States are overweight. And it's a little difficult sometimes to get people interested in getting their weight down to the ideal level. And it isn't just the weight sometimes, because once in a while we see a bouncing young fellow of 50, 60, or 70 who jumps on the scales and he's just right for his height. And he's, boy, that's me. But he doesn't realize how under-muscled and over-fatted he is because he doesn't take an exercise. And so we have the problem of physical exercise and mental exercise. And we go into these two facets with the individual. Mental activity. As Osler said to the doctor, the best way to prevent senility is to use your medical library. And physical activity, we do not believe in our study of these challenges and opportunities of aging that the shaky hand and the tottery gait has anything to do with the years that's passed over the man's head. It has to do with his physical condition. I saw a young lady in the office the other day, a senior, tired, no pep. Good God, what's the kids coming to? I said, don't you have any gymnasium? No, they don't give it to the juniors and seniors in my school. Even younger yet than I suppose, they're cutting them off from this source of strength. So if we turn to the oldster and say, look, physical exercise is what you need. Take a mile walk in the evening before bedtime and you won't need that second all. I talked with Dr. Hohenstein in Cleveland the other day about his exercise program. He's got a man in the city government of Cleveland who's had 2 coronaries. He goes to the gymnasium every day for a half-hour workout, and before he leaves the gymnasium, he swims a mile in the pool. Now, any one of you youngsters can try this. This is a pretty good exercise, but after 2 coronaries, it's something else. But we emphasize the exercise as a part of keeping fit. Now, if this is good for the oldster, when should we start doing it? Well, you got the answer. In childhood. First, the concept. This applies to your hair, to your teeth, your posture, your everything. I'm surprised, the interest that we get out of dentists. They are in this, Dr. Stalin told you that the dentists are in this joint council for the health care of the aging, and they have a big deal in this, because after all, when you're 20 or 30 and you go into the dentist, he looks at your mouth. You say, well, pull this one out and that one out. Oh, no, you don't. I'm going to live to be 90. Let's see what you can do about this. Not only what you can do about this, but they're going to have to think of something different to put in the teeth that's going to last better. And don't forget that more teeth are lost by gum disease than by caries. And this is particularly true as you get older. Well, this brings us back then to one of the points I like to make. That if this is geriatric practice, it is the practice of medicine. It is the same from the birth to the grave. The size of the dose may vary a little bit. But this makes me say what I have to say now, that there are no oldsters in my thinking. We all belong to the same group. This is where we should be. And this is some of the conclusions of our committee work. And these are the reasons for it. Now, in the course of getting this far along, we have done a lot of things. And I would like to close what few remarks I have left to say. And in this area, I'm going to court disaster by opposing motherhood and courting a little sin, maybe. But we have gone so far over this road that we've gotten to the point that we find that some of these hooks have a barb on, that some of these grand ideas are not all gold and silver. And it takes a little fortitude on my part to mention this to you, because when I mention it to other people, they turn up their nose and think I'm not for progress and so forth, but I think someone, and the medical profession is largely the one, and they get kicked from hell to breakfast by Congress and people in Washington because they're supposedly obstructionists, etc., etc., etc. But my good father used to say no to me every once in a while, and for my own benefit. Well, let me ask you. Do the oldsters need to be set apart by chronological measurement? Do you think? As one of my patients the other day said to me, she's 86 or 7 years old. She's not overweight. She's next to the busiest woman in town. And she said, a year ago last Christmas, I was down to my daughter's in Detroit at Christmas time. And I had a nosebleed. And I couldn't get the thing stopped. And they had to call my daughter's doctor. And he came out to see me at night. He had me down to his office several times after. And he was the nicest man. I enjoyed going down to see him so much. And she said, I came back home from my daughter's and my nose never bled all year long until last Christmas when I was down there, it bled again. And she said, the doctor had to come and see me, and I had to go see him a couple of times. And she said, the other night after I'd gone to bed, she says, I felt like my nose was going to bleed, and I got up and took off my old cotton nightgown and put on my black silk one, thinking I was going to have to call you in the middle of the night. And my nose didn't bleed. And that was my loss. I mean, there's nothing in one age of this life that's not in the other. And there's an awful lot of fun. There's an awful lot of wit and wisdom. I remember seeing a chap in the intensive care unit just the other day, extremely bad coronary, and I said, hi, young fella. You a man or a mouse? He was just taking a beating from the nurse who was trying to rub his back. I'm a mouse, he said. And that day he died. Up to the very end. This is there. This is the compensation that a physician gets, I'm sure, that maybe other people don't know about. But these are some of the things that make me think. Do they need to be set aside by a chronologic measurement? I'm very interested in the retirees club at Michigan State University. They're not all professors. Some of them cut the grass and the lawn for 35 or 40 years before they got in this club. But one of them, Professor Musselman, actually wrote some of my stuff longhand a couple years ago. He used to feed me all this stuff. I didn't have time to look it up. He and his wife joined the Square Dance Club downtown, and he said, and these were his words, "I didn't expect those young bucks to dance with my old lady, and I didn't expect those young gals to dance with me," but he says, after the first 2 weeks, we were all dancing together. He says, "This is the most democratic experience of my life." At 77. Do they need to be retired because of an arbitrary age? Do you mean to tell me that Dr. Logan at the Mayo Clinic on the first day of July was less a man than he was on June the 30th? Dr. Cushing left Harvard University. For 10 years taught brain surgery at Yale. Dr. Roosevelt left Harvard and went to North Carolina for many years as a professor in public health. When will we wake up? There's just too many people, young and old, who've accepted the philosophy of a Bismarck who was trying to prevent his country from turning socialistic. Do we need separate housing for the aging? Have you investigated this? Well, I haven't spent a lifetime at it, but I can show you some projects that are getting an awful lot of good advertisement that are about 1/10 for the aging and 9/10 for the guy who's doing the advertising. And a lot of well-meaning sons and daughters would like to palm their folks out of the big house on the corner for one reason or another. But ask the folks what they think about it. This is the crux of the situation, and I'm for them. And this sort of burns me a little bit too, and I give it to you. Do we need community booklets outlining the services for the aging as if they were a special burden and couldn't take care of themselves? Some medical societies do this. Do we need meals on wheels in the name of aging? Your community might need meals on wheels for the sick. But don't forget that every time you give, or anybody gives, there's a string attached. Now, some folks will say, well, you're crazy. I mean, what could be better than meals on wheels for poor Mr. So-and-so who can't cook or can't walk around her apartment? I'll tell you something that's worse, is not have her walk around her apartment. One of our little gals who lives down near the Capitol lost her husband a while back. She's in the 80s too. She heard about the Meals on Wheels program. So she calls them and they say, sure, we'll put your name on the list. A couple weeks later she calls us to come down and see her because her ankles are swollen. And we're sort of stupid and commonplace and we couldn't come to an answer right off the bat. So she told her daughter in Chicago and her daughter in New York. And they both come on because mother's sick with swollen ankles. This means dropsy. Dropsy means heart disease, and she's not long for this world. And so they came and see mother's swollen ankles. It cost money to come from New York, Chicago, to Lansing. And then they call for the doctor again. Well, you got to answer this problem. Well, you can't answer it in the woman's apartment, so you take her to the hospital. She has x-rays, electrocardiograms, blah, 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 and you end up with nothing. Why did she have swollen ankles? Because she was getting Meals on Wheels. And as soon as she gave up at least started the exercise, if you give Meals on Wheels, tell them an exercise packet with it. This ought to be along with it. This is what I'm trying to say. I don't care about the Meals on Wheels. It's a good thing for some people. It gives them nutrition. Maybe they wouldn't get otherwise. But don't forget there's something equally important that ought to go along with anything you give away this time. Do we need home care programs in the name of aging? Now, if you're talking about home care programs like the Montefiore business in New York and the one in Boston, well, don't forget that this is an expensive program, and it's run on a hospital-based situation wherein the doctors are trained in a team effort. And you just can't do this at random in a city unless you do have hospital-based programs and some training. Now, if you're thinking about care in the home by a mother or father or sister or brother, then I'm for you. Because this is the best kind of care yet as far as I'm concerned. And you can do a physical examination in the home. Don't forget that. And if any of you doctors here are users of the stethoscope, I defy you to do a physical examination in an ordinary hospital, not the Muncie one, this is a better one, but the ordinary one. Because you can't do it. You can get the television in there and the radio and the loud jokes that the doctor's telling the nurse at the desk down the hall, but you can't get anything out of the chest. Do we need recreation centers, shuffleboard courts? I got my ears trimmed with this one down in Detroit. Bingo raffles, drop-in centers for the aging. It's like pool rooms for the kids. This is a good thing for the director because he feels like he's doing something. But only the lazy will be found there. None of my patients will be found there. And do we need more and more nursing homes for the aging? Let's not buy all this stuff in the name of the aging. I think we need more nursing homes probably. But stop and think about it a little bit. I think that the more nursing homes we have is a very good measurement of the deterioration of the American home when everybody's too damn quick to send grandpa and grandpa or somebody else out to a nursing home on the basis of dollars and cents so you don't have to do the work. And you're losing a priceless heritage and a chance to do something that will enrich your own humanity. What we do need. I'm sure that all of you have sometime or other heard or read Major Mayer's report of the Korea prisoners, how many thousands of Americans were taken prisoners in Korea and 30% of them died. 229 Turks were taken prisoners in Korea and 229 Turks came home. Why? Well, there are many reasons. They stuck together. There was no fragmentation. There was no brainwashing affected them because the answer from the Turks came from one mouth. The guy who was the head of the pot. First the major, then the lieutenant, then the first sergeant, so on down the line. And when the Russians said, "You are disturbing our organization, we'll move you out," they moved the major out, then the lieutenant took over. They'd say, "You can't organize like this, you must do it this other way," and the lieutenant would answer, say, "I will tell my men." So they moved the lieutenant out, and finally get down to the sergeant, and then down to the first buck private. And first thing you know, all the Turks roll in the other pile, then they had shifting back and forth. But they had details. They were living in these Korean villages. They had a detail to take care of the sick. What did the detail do? They weren't doctors. They went out in the woods and pulled roots out of the ground and scraped the bark off the roots and boiled it up to make a tea. They took the clothes off of the sick and washed them. They put clean clothes back on them. They laid down beside them to keep them warm. They spoon-fed them. They didn't have to say anything. All this meant, "We love you, we want you to stay here, get well." 229 came back. The testimony to discipline and the Christ-like attitude that we all need. So what we need is to bind our own humanity together. brothers under one Father. We want you, we love you, and we are you. This caring for one another will make us more Christ-like. And this is the art of medicine. Thank you.